The year was 2004, and the internet was still a wild frontier where law enforcement struggled to navigate the digital landscape. While millions of Americans were just beginning to understand the convenience of online shopping, a dark underbelly was growing rapidly beneath the surface. This was a world where identity theft was not just a nuisance, but a multi-million-dollar industry run by faceless avatars in encrypted chat rooms. In the shadows of this digital expansion, a notorious forum known as Shadow Realm emerged as the premier marketplace for stolen data. It was an exclusive club where criminals bought and sold credit card numbers and fake identification with impunity. But little did they know that a silent observer was watching there, every move waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Shadow Realm was not easily accessible to the average internet user, as it required a strict vetting process to join its ranks. The administrators of the site were paranoid and ruthless, ensuring that only proven scammers could enter their digital sanctuary. They operated with a level of sophistication that baffled local police departments and frustrated federal agents who were used to chasing physical evidence. The site boasted thousands of members from across the globe, creating a decentralized network of fraud that seemed impossible to dismantle. However, the United States Secret Service had decided that the time for observation was over. They launched a daring operation that would require an agent to infiltrate the inner circle of the most dangerous cybercrime ring in history. Enter Special Agent Michael Thorne, a man who had spent his career chasing counterfeiters, but now found himself staring at a glowing computer screen in a windowless room. Thorne was tasked with creating a persona that would be convincing enough to fool the most skeptical hackers on the planet. He spent weeks studying the slang and the technical jargon used in these underground forums, absorbing the culture of the cyber criminal. His new identity was that of a seasoned carder named Cygnus, who claimed to have a massive supply of stolen credit card dumps from a compromised retail chain. The goal was simple yet dangerous. Thorne had to gain the trust of the site administrators and eventually take control of the server itself. The first hurdle for Thorne was getting past the initial screening process, which involved a rigorous interrogation by a lower-level moderator. The moderator demanded proof of the stolen data, and Thorne had to provide valid credit card numbers that the Secret Service had obtained from cooperating banks. It was a high-stakes gamble because if the criminals suspected a trap, the entire operation would be burned before it even began. Thorne sat sweating in his ergonomic chair, typing responses with deliberate typos and casual arrogance to match the persona of an outlaw. The moderator took hours to verify the numbers, leaving Thorne in a state of agonizing suspense as the cursor blinked rhythmically on his bulky monitor. When the acceptance message finally appeared on the screen, Thorne let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He was in. The interface of Shadow Realm was primitive by modern standards, featuring black backgrounds and neon green text, but to the criminals, it was a kingdom. Thorne began to navigate the threads where users openly bragged about their purchases of luxury goods bought with stolen money. He saw discussions on how to manufacture fake driver licenses and how to encode magnetic strips on blank cards. The scale of the operation was staggering, and Thorne realized that taking down a few low-level users would not be enough. He needed the head of the snake. The leader of Shadow Realm was a mysterious figure known only by the handle Viper. Viper was a legend in the underground community, credited with writing the code that kept the site secure from law enforcement. Rumors circulated that Viper was based in Eastern Europe, or perhaps Southeast Asia, making him legally untouchable. Thorne knew that to catch Viper, he would have to offer something that the elusive administrator could not refuse. The Secret Service team devised a plan to offer a powerful dedicated server to host the site, claiming it was located in a jurisdiction with no extradition treaty. It was a classic Trojan horse strategy tailored for the digital age. Thorn spent the next few months building his reputation as Cygnus by facilitating legitimate illegal transactions under the watchful eye of his supervisors. He became a fixture in the chat rooms, offering advice to newbies and mediating disputes between veteran scammers. The psychological toll of pretending to be a criminal was immense, as Thorn had to witness the financial ruin of innocent victims without breaking character. He had to remind himself daily that the end goal justified the means, and that stopping the entire network was the only way to protect the public. His dedication paid off when Viper finally sent him a direct message, praising his contribution to the community. The direct communication with Viper was the breakthrough the agency had been waiting for, but it also escalated the danger. Viper was cautious and asked probing questions about the technical specifications of the server Thorn was offering. Thorn relied on the technical experts at the Secret Service to craft responses that demonstrated a high level of expertise. They promised Viper a secure haven where the site could operate faster and more efficiently than ever before. The bait was set, and the team waited anxiously to see if the paranoid leader would bite. The tension in the operation room was palpable, as days turned into weeks without a definitive answer. Finally, Viper agreed to migrate the Shadow Realm, hosting to the server provided by Thorn. This was the fatal mistake that sealed the fate of the entire organization. Unbeknownst to the criminals, the new server was physically located in a secure government facility in New Jersey. Every keystroke, every private message, and every transaction was now being logged by the United States Secret Service. The agents watched in real time as the criminals conducted their business, believing they were more secure than ever. It was a surveillance goldmine, providing undeniable evidence against thousands of individuals. With the server under their control, the investigation shifted from infiltration to identification. The agents had to link the digital avatars to real-world identities, which was a tedious process of connecting IP addresses to physical locations. They tracked shipments of illegal goods purchased with stolen cards and followed the money trails through various digital currency exchanges. Thorn continued to play the role of the helpful administrator Cygnus, ensuring that the site remained stable, while his colleagues built dossiers on the key players. The sheer volume of evidence was overwhelming, requiring a massive task force to process the data. One of the most shocking discoveries was the geographic diversity of the members, who came from every corner of the United States and beyond. They were college students and suburban fathers, and unemployed tech enthusiasts, all united by greed. The anonymity of the chat room had emboldened them to commit crimes they would never dream of attempting in person. Thorn watched as they discussed their personal lives in private messages, revealing details that would eventually lead to their arrest. It was a study in human hubris, as the criminals felt invincible behind their computer screens. As the evidence mounted, the Department of Justice began to prepare for a coordinated takedown that would span multiple states and countries. The operation was named Operation Firewall, and it required precise timing to ensure that suspects did not have time to destroy evidence. Thorn had to maintain his cover until the very last second, keeping the site running smoothly even as the net closed in. The stress of living a double life was beginning to show on Thorn, who had barely slept in weeks. He knew that once the raid happened, his life as Cygnus would be over forever. The date for the takedown was set for a Tuesday morning in late October, a time when most targets would be at their computers. Briefings were held at field offices across the country, where tactical teams were given packages containing photos and addresses of the suspects. Thorne sat in the command center, watching the clock tick down, knowing that hundreds of agents were moving into position. The silence in the room was heavy with anticipation, as the final order was given to execute the warrants. It was the culmination of over a year of undercover work and millions of dollars in resources. At exactly 6 in the morning, local time teams of federal agents breached doors from California to New York. The element of surprise was total, and many suspects were arrested while still sitting in their pajamas in front of their computers. In the chat room, panic began to set in as members stopped responding mid-sentence. Thorne posted a final message as Cygnus, claiming technical difficulties, to keep the remaining users online for as long as possible. The confusion in the chat room was chaotic as users wondered why their friends were disappearing one by one. Back at the command center, reports of successful arrests began to flood in via secure channels. Computers and hard drives and stacks of cash were being seized as evidence. The physical reality of the raid clashed violently with the digital world of Shadow Realm. The agents found rooms filled with stolen merchandise, ranging from high-end electronics to designer clothing. The scale of the fraud was even larger than they had anticipated, with millions of dollars in losses prevented by the intervention. Thorne felt a wave of relief wash over him as the operation proved to be a massive success. However, the capture of Viper remained the primary objective, and his location was still the subject of intense scrutiny. The trace on his connection led to a surprising location not in Eastern Europe, but in a quiet residential neighborhood in the American Southwest. It turned out that the mastermind behind the global ring was a college dropout living in his parents' basement. The team moved in on the house, with caution, knowing that Viper might have rigged his systems to wipe data upon entry. When they entered the room, they found a young man frozen in shock, surrounded by servers and empty soda cans. The arrest of Viper sent shockwaves through the cybercrime community as news of Operation Firewall broke on mainstream media. The homepage of Shadow Realm was replaced with a stark banner from the Department of Justice announcing the seizure of the domain. It was a powerful message to other criminals that the internet was not a lawless zone. Thorne watched the news reports from his office, feeling a strange sense of detachment from the character he had played for so long. Cygnus was dead, but the impact of his actions would be felt for years. The legal proceedings that followed were unprecedented, as prosecutors had to explain complex digital crimes to juries who were largely unfamiliar with the technology. The logs from the chat room provided by Thorne were the centerpiece of the prosecution case. The defense attorneys tried to argue entrapment, claiming that the government had facilitated the crimes by providing the server. However, the judges ruled that the criminal intent existed long before the government intervention. The convictions piled up, resulting in lengthy prison sentences for the administrators and key members. Operation Firewall marked a turning point in the history of cybercrime investigation, establishing new protocols for digital undercover work. It proved that law enforcement could beat hackers at their own game by using social engineering and technical superiority. The case became a textbook example for future agents studying at the academy. Thorne received a commendation for his work, but his identity remained protected to ensure his safety. He returned to regular duty, but the experience of living inside the mind of a cyber criminal stayed with him. The legacy of Shadow Realm served as a warning, but it also pushed criminals to develop more secure methods of communication. The cat-and-mouse game between law enforcement and scammers continued to evolve, with encryption becoming stronger and forums becoming more decentralized. Yet the fundamental flaw remained the human element. no matter how secure the technology trust, was always the weak link that could be exploited. Thorne knew that there would always be another Viper and another forum waiting to take its place. In the years following the operation, the tactics used by Thorne were refined and adapted for the era of dark web marketplaces. The principle of taking over the infrastructure to unmask the users became a standard strategy for agencies worldwide. The chat logs from Shadow Realm were studied by criminologists to understand the sociology of online criminal communities. They revealed a toxic culture of greed and entitlement that thrived in the absence of accountability. The operation had shone a light into a dark corner of the internet that most people never knew existed. Looking back, the success of the operation hinged on the ability of one agent to blend into a hostile environment. Thorne had to suppress his own moral compass to survive in a world where theft was celebrated. The psychological strain of deep cover work is often overlooked in the retelling of such stories, but it is a very real burden. Thorne had to undergo debriefing and counseling to reintegrate into his normal life. The line between the criminal persona and the real self can blur dangerously during long operations. The victims of the Shadow Realm fraud ring were arguably the most forgotten part of the story. Thousands of people had their credit scores ruined and their savings drained by the faceless predators in the chat room. The recovery of funds was difficult as much of the money had been spent or laundered through complex networks. The operation provided some justice, but it could not undo the financial trauma inflicted on the innocent. It served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of personal data in the digital age. The technology used in the early 2004 period seems archaic now, but the methods of social manipulation remain timeless. Phishing and social engineering and pretexting are still the primary tools of cyber criminals today. The Shadow Realm case demonstrated that the most sophisticated firewall cannot stop a user from voluntarily handing over their keys. Thorne had exploited this very weakness to gain access to the inner circle. It is a lesson that security experts continue to preach to this day. As the dust settled on Operation Firewall, the Secret Service expanded its electronic crimes task forces across the nation. The agency, which was originally founded to combat currency counterfeiting, had successfully adapted to the digital equivalent. The skills developed during the investigation of Shadow Realm laid the groundwork for future battles against ransomware and state-sponsored hacking. Thorne eventually retired from field work, moving into a training role where he shared his experiences with new recruits. The story of the Undercover chat room remains a fascinating chapter in the history of the internet. It was a time when the rules were being written and the boundaries of jurisdiction were being tested. The image of the federal agent sitting in a dark room typing slang into a green terminal is a defining snapshot of that era. It represents the collision of old-world law enforcement with new-world crime. The raid on Shadow Realm was the first major victory in a war that is still being fought today. Today, the dark web has replaced the open forums of the past, making infiltration significantly harder and more dangerous. However, the core principles of investigation remain the same. Agents must still build trust and gather intelligence, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. The ghost of Cygnus lives on in every undercover operation that targets the digital underground. The scammers may have better tools now, but they still share the same fatal flaw of arrogance. The final question that lingers is whether we can ever truly secure our digital lives. As long as there is profit to be made from stolen data, there will be those willing to take the risk. The Shadow Realm case proved that no one is untouchable, not even the administrators who believe they are gods of their own digital kingdoms. It serves as a permanent record that in the digital world someone is always watching. The screen that protects the criminal also serves as the window for their capture. As we reflect on this historical puzzle, we must recognize the tireless work of the agents who patrol the silent corridors of the internet. They are the unseen guardians who stand between the public and the chaos of unchecked cybercrime. The story of Michael Thorne and the Shadow Realm is a testament to their dedication and ingenuity. It is a reminder that justice can be served even in a world made of code and shadows. The chat room is closed, but the vigilance continues. Ultimately, the exposure of the major scam was not just about arrests, but about shattering the illusion of safety that criminals felt online. It disrupted the economy of fraud and forced the underground to retreat into deeper shadows. The impact of that disruption saved countless potential victims from financial ruin. And somewhere in a secure archive, the logs of Shadow Realm sit as a dusty digital artifact of a time when the good guys won a major battle in the endless cyber war.